Okay, welcome to Real News Live. Great to have you guys here. We didn't have a video play because I have the wrong folder. I've got Brian's folder in here. Let's play the video anyway, right? Here we go.
All right.
Welcome, everybody, to a special Toxically Masculine Tuesday edition of Real News Live. It is the vice presidential debate. Guess what bullshit I've already gone through? I posted the link to the Rumble version of this, which is where I'd like to drive most of my customers and viewers, and Facebook took it down as spam for the third time. If you keep spamming people, fuck you, Zuck. I can't wait for this guy to, whatever. Let's just do that. All right, guys, welcome. It is VP debate night number one, the one and only. They're already trying to spin a bunch of stuff about how Trump doesn't want to do a 60 minutes interview. I'm like, when did Trump ever agree to it? But we're going to run through the introductions, talk about Israel, and then we're going to get on with the VP debate, which starts in about 5 minutes. All right, joined for the first time in a while to our immediate right is Dr. Brooks Agnew after his Brooks cruise. They were like sailing doodles. Brooks was there, naked girls jumping off the deck the whole time. And
yes, but they all weigh 300 pounds.
And what are you drinking? What are you drinking, buddy?
I'm drinking coffee tonight. I'm jet lagging my butt off, so I'm trying to get some caffeine in my system so I can join you guys and be toxically masculine.
That's right. Well, we appreciate you being here. And I'm sorry about my sound quality. This thing keeps not working for me. It was working and then it wasn't working and now it's just not working. So I'm screaming into the webcam mic. Also joined tonight by TV's Blake Wally. Blake, how are you doing tonight, man? And what's up with you?
Doing well. It's great to be here. I'm excited about the debate, and I'm going to be drinking a little Frontier whiskey here, a little Bullet bourbon.
All right. Sounds awesome. We're also joined by a special guest tonight, Brian Engelman of the Strictly Football Podcast, along with Mike Barra. Sorry about your Browns. They got screwed. I think we're going to have to talk about on Thursday. We're going to have to talk about officiating because both your team's game and my team's game were affected by the officiating. So, but anyway, what do you do? How you doing? What are you drinking? And how you feeling tonight before this debate?
No, I'm feeling good. With Myles Garrett, the #1 defensive player of the year on the team, he's held on every single play. So if you're going to at least negate that by not calling proper fouls and letting him get manhandled all game, you certainly don't call ticky-tack shit on our offensive linemen. So, yeah, we'll talk about that on the Strictly Football Podcast on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Everybody, please check it out on both of our channels, The New American Media and all of Mike's. And, of course, I did a show earlier today with Blake, the Agree to Disagree show. So check that one out. We got into all of the stuff, a really deep dive into calamity across the globe. So thanks for having me. And welcome back, bro.
All right. Great to have you here. I'm just wondering if anybody can hear me any better with these plugged into my speakers.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you're not better. It does sound better than it did. Now I can't hear you guys, though. So it's
you could probably go without it, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, let me try.
Mike is okay.
We had similar issues earlier. I went through like 3 sets of these and 2 microphones before we found a decent combination.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, forget this. We're not. Yeah, it's just a mess. I'm just going to scream into the microphone. All right. And joined, of course, by the final one to be introduced, but by no means the last member of the crew. The amazing stud himself, the most toxically masculine, maybe second most toxically masculine man I know on the planet Earth. Steve Doran, the trail boss. Steve, did you kill anything today?
Nope, not at all. Actually, is that me doing that feedback, or was that was me?
No. I don't know.
Okay. Anyway,
you sound good.
all right. So anyway, just going through my, I'm doing the health thing and all that kind of stuff. So right now I'm going through my fasting phase of the month. So the only thing I get to drink is coffee or tea.
Cool, very cool. Okay, guys, I want to talk about something. I want to share. Some video out of Israel tonight. There is another Arab attack going on in Israel, and it's actually pretty ugly. But where is it, Mike? Get over there. Let's watch it. So there's a missile attack going on in Israel right now, and it's been going on for most of the night. I kind of wanted to get everybody's opinion quickly. There are some videos and some stuff showing up that, guys, some of the bombs are empty. There's no warheads in them, but some of them clearly are exploding. Brooks, you got any thoughts on this? And I think they're just trying to escalate because things are going so badly for the deep state in America right now.
Well, yeah, I think they are trying to escalate, and I think a truthful but not accurate statement is that they launched more than 200 missiles. I think probably the number's more like 400, but they don't want to. They don't want to appear like they're escalating things. They're trying to respond to Israel's assassination of Nasrallah. They're different tactics. The Israelis are trying to kill off leadership. The Iranians are trying to basically do what they've been trying to do for the last 20 years, which is wipe Israel off the map. They don't want Israel to exist, and they're not going to accept any terms other than that. But the rest of it's all politics, and you can't believe anything anybody is saying, least of all Jake Sullivan.
Yeah, and again, there was video today of Jimmy Carter being dragged around, and I would remind everybody that Jimmy Carter, who just turned 100 years old today, none of this shit would be happening if it wasn't for Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is the third worst president in American history. He's a piece of shit. He's caused untold death to Americans and Jews all over the world. Fuck Jimmy Carter. I hope you stay alive and suffer for another 10 years, you piece of shit. Blake.
Yeah.
How you doing, man? What do you think about this new attack on Israel? We're going to switch over to the debate as soon as it gets started. So hit it.
Yeah.
Ah, shit. They're starting. Damn it.
Okay.
All right.
Quickly agree with Brooks. Yeah, that's it. It's retaliatory. They had to.
Anybody have a quick one? Steve, Brian, anybody quick input?
The Arab nations are pieces of filth, and
Yes.
they want to exterminate women and children, and that makes them my enemy.
And those
All right.
videos look like what hell would look like in my dreams. Like it looks like being in hell. So
Yeah.
I just want this. I want this stuff to stop.
Yeah.
Put the
Yeah.
MAGA Unity
Where would
Party
you
and put an
hide?
adult back in charge for a
All
first
right,
time
we're
in a
going
long
to
time.
We're going to slide over to the debate, and let's get the audio rolling. Let me know if you guys can hear it.
Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We
Yeah.
do not share the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
But what about biting?
Tonight,
what
our
about
country is
crotch
facing
kicking?
several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic
Obama.
impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed. thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state-sponsored terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this.
They're going to try to talk about
just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, to Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump
can't we just
turn
get
towards
a
Vladimir
liar
Putin,
buzzer or something?
Every time he lies, Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become...
Okay, let's pause this a second to go around the horn. Who did you think won that one? Brooks?
Well, I think Vance won because the obvious answer to everybody is that the billions of dollars that Obama and through Biden and Harris to Iran is the reason why we're seeing all these attacks. We saw no attacks because Iran was in a little box about that big and they were broke.
Yeah. Blake, who do you think won that round?
Well, it's got to be Vance, even though he took the long road, like he was giving an opening statement. They should have done opening statements before that. He was prepared for it. But as clearly, we've seen both candidates. We saw Trump in 4 years. Clearly, his foreign policy was better, and J.D. Vance was right on point. We didn't have any major conflicts. It's all been under Biden. Money in Iran, that's not good. So, can't win.
Yeah. Steve, who do you think won that first round?
Vance. I wish he hadn't pontificated there at the beginning, but I think it was Vance. Also, it's no secret that during the Trump administration, we didn't have the problems that we're having today. We didn't leave billions of dollars of equipment behind for our enemies to use against us and our allies. We didn't fund them with billions of dollars so that they could buy more weapons. So clearly, and the other thing, they always go back and blame Trump. They've had 3.5 years to do whatever they wanted to do. They've done nothing, absolutely nothing. So clearly to me, Vance won that one.
Brian, quickly, who do you think won that round?
I think J.D. Vance did fantastic in that round. I think the body language of Tim Walz is ridiculous. He looks nervous. He's jittery. J.D. just kind of has a strong plan together. He has the right body right temperament and the right body language for it. Whereas W.C. Fields right there, that's who the Tim Walz guy keeps reminding me of, W.C. Fields.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm gonna say that was a draw. I thought Vance completely blew his opportunity to blow him out of the water so he could tell us he's raised in a middle-class family. What the fuck was that all about? You got plenty of chances to introduce yourself. just get on with it. And he should have addressed all the lies that Waltz told. And he didn't. So I don't think either guy really won that. I think at the end, maybe the point of, look, there were no wars when Trump was president was fairly well done. Brian, can you take that down? We're going to go back to
Absolutely. Got it.
Back to the debate itself. Perfect. All right, let's go. It's question number 2.
One of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes.
Okay.
Are they serious?
Quickly here. First of all, he asked to say, where's the relief? Why isn't it already there? It's because we spent $265 billion in Ukraine, and then he has to attack climate change. I just got to get that out before he answers. Please, Vance, don't screw this one up. All right, sorry. Go.
Hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Waltz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people. Our prayers go out to them. And we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as
what do you mean,
co-chair of the
down
Council
there?
of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen.
No, it didn't.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us
He's
is
a
to
liar.
continue
I
to
worked
move
up
forward
in
that climate
that
change
area.
is real.
The farmers hate his
Reducing our
guts.
impact is absolutely
The,
critical, but this is
they're
not a
total
false choice.
conservatives, and
You
they
can
don't
do
believe
that
in
at the same
climate
time you're
change. Everything he
creating the
said was a
jobs that we're
total
seeing
lie.
all across the country.
Yeah,
This
it's a total liar.
administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
It is.
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate.
Okay, let's go through this one real quick. Again, Vance should have spun. First of all, he should have said climate change is nonsense. Climate is not changing. This hurricane is not more severe than the ones we had in the 60s. Look it up. It's on my website. They should have been ready for this. And you don't spend 2 minutes talking about fucking climate change. You should have spent the time talking about the people of North Carolina and where is the federal help. These people are drowning. Their dogs and their cats and their horses are drowning. That's what he should have talked about. Again, a draw at best. Brian, Steve, you go first, and then we'll go to Brian. Steve?
I can't disagree with anything you said. First of all, I think it's ridiculous when you have people suffering, dying.
You're talking about climate change.
Yeah, to talk about climate change is it's absolutely insane in my opinion on both sides.
I don't know why Vance bought into that and talked about fucking climate change. It's a joke. Brian, what do you think?
Back to the previous question with JD Vance, I thought it was weird that he said weird science, because now I'm thinking about the word weird again. So just a little mnemonic thing there. And then during that one, I think I'm going to give a nice point to our good friend W.C. Fields here. I think that he had an actual amazing point with burying the power lines, W.C. Fields, Tim Walz, because burying power lines is what led to what's happened in Hawaii. And I'm currently experiencing a really bad problem with our power consistently going out because they're not maintaining the basic infrastructure in these cities. And so point to Walz.
This is something we could have put people to work with for the last 20 years. Blake, your thoughts on
good
that
point
second
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it should have been one of the last questions. Definitely didn't deserve the number 2 one. They're acting like hurricanes are some kind of a new phenomenon. It's ridiculous. And as Dr. Brooks is pointing out, sea levels haven't risen. They probably haven't risen since the last ice age. So it is at least man-made global warming is a hoax. There is climate change, but that's another story. It's driven by the sun. Man's impact is minuscule, and they're making a huge deal out of nothing. And none of these environmentalist predictions have come true in decades.
Yeah, and you could say it exactly like that. And then the other thing you could say is, and why is it the Democrats are always talking about first global warming, and now they're talking about climate change? And why is it the solution is always that they take more of your money through taxes and more of your freedoms away? Why is that always the solution? Bam! I mean, I could win this fucking debate if I was up there. Brooks, go ahead quickly. We got to get back.
You're exactly right. Like I said in the chat room, 95% of government-supported scientists believe climate change is responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Send me your money and give me your vote, and we'll go to war with the sun, and we'll fix this.
Yeah, that's what I would say. What are you going to do? Attack the sun?
Yeah, Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
Back to it.
Exactly.
Back to it.
Margaret. Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters.
It's a plan.
Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so.
He better stick to his guns.
Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record
How about
levels.
murders?
So
How about rapes?
The bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build
Screw
the wall,
fentanyl.
re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 20, 25
How about
million
the
illegal aliens
billions
who are
of
here in the
dollars we're
country.
spending on
What
them?
do we do with them? I
Keeping
think the first
our
thing that
own
we do
citizens
is we start
homeless,
with the
keeping
criminal
our
migrants.
veterans
About
homeless.
1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules?
Yeah,
children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this
drug mules aren't true. There's no drug mules anymore.
The good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions.
Can we prove
but
that?
look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs. DOJ money to speed up.
What about the wall?
The adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator,
because Democrat Congress blocked it.
People and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children?
No,
even if their kids are U.S. citizens.
Deport them all.
1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border.
There you
I didn't
go.
accuse
Good
Kamala
redirect.
Harris of inviting drug mules. I
Redirect,
said that she
everyone.
enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace,
Walt
and it
shook his
has
head
to
in
stop.
agreement.
Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor.
Okay, quickly. How'd that go? Who won that round? I think Vance finally pulled one out there a little bit, but he could have done better.
He could have done a lot better. I think that, first of all, they stopped the building of the border wall. They actually took a lot of the border wall down, got rid of it. Mm-hmm. We know every American in this country, unless you're a mushroom under a rock, knows how many people were freely left across the border, how much money they're getting a month. And it's completely destroying our economy. It's undermining the American people. We see it day in, day out. And this administration could give a crap about any of it.
Yeah. Blake.
Yeah, and this should have been an easy layup, but he could have gone for the slam dunk on this one because this is the easiest issue he's going to see all night. And that border stuff that Walz is saying, that bill, only 20 billion of 118 billion, what is actually going to go towards the border anyway. Yeah. Most of it was going to go to Ukraine. They had no intention. It wasn't intended to pass. It was loaded with poison pills. So that's a disingenuous argument.
Yeah, well, you could say something like that, but I think that's like you're getting into the minutia. Brooks, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Blake. It was an easy layup. He should have said the same thing that Donald Trump said in 2015 when he was running for president. Look, we have laws, and the laws say if you come into this country illegally, you have to go back. I'm sorry. Parents and children will be returned to their home countries, and they can apply legally after we build the wall.
That's the easy answer. Brian, quick thoughts.
Every time I see Tim Walz turn around, it reminds me of W.C. Fields. Also, the border policy that they keep using this trick by saying, oh, well, we had this plan that all these people said was so fantastic. And, the Republicans and Trump, they said, let's not do that so that we can have a topic to run our campaign on. Yeah, there's Tim Walz right there. But anyway, I just think it's ridiculous because, as Blake said, that was all pork and no wall. That was a poison pill. That was never legitimate or serious in the first place. And finally, no, Trump did not have 4 years. You impeached him on 2 fake bullshit kangaroo court trials twice, and now there's been 2 assassination attempts. All you've done is get in the way instead of building infrastructure so that we don't have mass casualty events like we had with the flooding. You know what? We wasted 4 years because the Democrats lied to us and wasted all of our time when we could have been doing something productive just because they don't like the orange man.
Yeah, and I you know, again, I think it's a simple response. The reason the border wall didn't get built is because you and your party blocked it, and you took the wall down when you got in office, and you've kept it from being built, and you've let record numbers of illegals into this country, many of whom are terrorists and armed and raping and killing and murdering. And by the way, you know, we'll
eating cats and dogs.
They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And by the way, when are you going to get down to North Carolina and Tennessee and start helping these Americans? You sent $265 billion to Ukraine in the last 4 years, and you told Donald Trump he couldn't have $5 billion to finish the wall. Boom! But he didn't do that, so fine. All right, let's go back and catch it from here.
What about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
That is what 50% means.
We fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this.
How are they demonizing
talking about and saying I will create stories to bring attention to this? That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Like climate change.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll
We
give
want
you 1 minute, but
we want to villainize these people because they're committing crimes against American
citizens. The governor
citizens.
has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
That's interesting.
Well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank
yeah,
you,
talk
Senator. We
about why
have
it's
so
for
much to get
temporary
to.
protection.
Margaret, I think it's
That's the Harris
We're going to
policy.
turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
No. You got to
guys
address
are going to
that.
fact check.
No, you
and
got to
since you're
address that. You
fact-checking
can't
me,
let her get away
I think
with
it's
that.
important to say what's actually going
Thank
on.
you. Steamroll
So there's
her.
an application called the CBP One app,
Thank you.
where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing.
Okay, quickly, gentlemen. Brooks, who won that?
Well, it was a mess. This argument is being fought on the wrong grounds here. The argument should be fought on the law, not what you want the laws to be, but what the laws are. That's the king in this country. And the laws are you cannot enter the country illegally. And then they're being rewarded for doing it by giving these EBT cards support. They're being put up in hotels. They're being given cars, driver's licenses, and they're being registered to vote.
Yep, and good point here. The border didn't open itself would have been a great line. Brian, real quick, what'd you think of that round?
Look, I'm glad we're talking Springfield. You don't dump 30,000 Steeler fans into Browns territory. They have no shared culture. You don't do that. I love huge win for him steamrolling her and pushing forward and not letting her get away with that goofy little pseudo fact check. That was really huge. Huge kudos, big gold star for him. And then look, illegal immigration, this is not an accidental thing that's occurring and we're trying to deal with it or some natural disaster. This is the Obama plan. Just drill down on this. People do not like this, from the Bronx to the homeland, the heartland of the country. Nobody wants their communities invaded by people with no shared experiences.
Yeah, they're just importing voters. Cut to the chase. That's what this is about.
Right. Steve.
All right, I'm sick of this. Like, oh, we don't want to treat people badly. We don't want to hurt these illegal immigrants' feelings by talking rough to them and making them leave the country. Who gives a crap how they feel? I could care less. They came in illegally. They need to be gotten out of here as quickly as possible. And I hope their feelings are hurt for the rest of their life on their way out.
There you go. Why we don't care? It's because they're criminals. Blake, real quick.
Yeah, Brooks nailed it. They're incentivizing these immigrants to come up here, and they're not doing anything about it. They're perpetuating the problem, and they've created the mess. It's only going to get worse under their administration, and they pretended there wasn't a crisis. So something will have to be done. I'd like to be able to keep some of the good ones, but they should not have voting rights for like at least 10 years, if not longer.
They're kids, maybe. But they should never have voting rights.
And I'd like to have no new immigrants for 25 years. We did that in the 60s. Let's do it again. Absolutely no immigration whatsoever. Back to it.
The legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have.
One app has not been on the books since 1990.
Cut that mic off.
Gentlemen,
don't let him talk.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to.
I have the power, boys. That was
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters.
Yuck.
Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded
Tim
somewhere.
Waltz
It's
was
foundational
giving
to where
people in
you're
his
at.
state
And then making sure
$650,000
that things you buy
loans
every
as
day,
long
whether
as
they
they
be
were not
prescription
American
drugs
citizens.
or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look,
Right.
the $35
Right.
insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save
about
money
no
in the
tax
long
on
run,
tips?
and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business.
Do the right thing for
increasing that to
families?
$50,000.
Yeah.
Why are you
Tax
giving
on
illegal
difference
immigrants
between us. Donald Trump
$10,000
made
a month
promise, and I'll
plus?
give you this. He kept it.
Yep.
He took folks from Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion.
So here you go. Right here's an opportunity to say exactly what you just said. Here's a chance to swing back and go, okay, you're giving $6,000 a month to illegal immigrants, criminals in this country, criminally, and you're complaining about Americans getting tax cuts. Boom, that's it.
And in his state, he is giving loans to illegal immigrants. If you're a U.S. citizen, you do not qualify.
Over American citizens, right?
Increase in the national debt, the
Communist
largest
bastard.
ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share.
Oh,
when we
yeah.
do that, our system
what
works
Roosevelt
best.
said.
More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit
Again,
by
trying to
$5.8
distract him
trillion.
from
My
responding
question is the
directly
same
to
for
what
you.
he's
How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now.
That's
Not when
right.
asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president,
I said
You
that all the
absolutely
time.
can't.
Trump
They
believes he
cannot.
does.
That's
My
exactly
pro tip
right.
of the day is this: if you need
There's an easy answer to this. Quick response. Okay. Why does Donald Trump need to listen to economists when he's already been president and created the best economy in America in the last 60 years? That's the answer.
Well, they're trying to pin any loss from COVID on Donald Trump, like he's the one that unleashed the virus on the world. It's so disingenuous.
Exactly. By the way, Tim, the Chinese introduced COVID to the world, not
need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years?
Oh, my
the last year as
God.
president.
How is it
That's
fair
what's
that
wrong
our
with the
tax dollars
system.
are going
There's
to
a way
illegal
around
immigrants?
it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Okay, quickly, guys, we got to speed this up a little bit. You should have gone with no tax on tips, Brooks. I thought Vance destroyed him on that one. That was a 2-point round in a boxing match. Blake, what do you think?
Well, we got a billionaire businessman, common sense, wisdom versus, and we have a 4-year track record of an awesome economy versus Kamala and Tim Walz listening to supposed experts and 4 years of shitty economy. So I think it's a no-brainer there.
Steve Doran, how do you think that round went?
I think it went good. I'm glad that Vance came back and shut him down. people have to listen to the facts. We know, we all lived through it. We know that during the Trump administration, everything was better, everything was cheaper, people made more money. And so, for him to say, oh, the experts, who gives a shit what the experts are saying? Obviously, they're not very capable if they are saying that what he's already done and proven is not going to work.
Right. The only expert I listen to is Brooks Agnew. Brooks, quickly, and then Brian.
Nobody wants to listen to taxpayer-funded experts tell us anything.
Yeah.
How can no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security be a tax cut for the rich? Get a fucking clue.
Yeah. Okay. Brian, quickly.
It's not about believing the experts. It's about the experts proving on a daily basis that they're still qualified to hold the position of expert. They're hypotheses, and you test them nonstop. That's what science is. This blindfolded, nonstop following, this cult-like thing that they do is the opposite of science. And I thought, Vance, that was his best round. That last burst there was fantastic. And I'm noticing how impressive it is, like the even keel. He's not too condescending. He's not flubbing. He's well put together.
Yeah, he's not really attacking. All right, let's get back to it.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that.
Oops.
We lost it.
Technical error when they asked a hard question.
Happen? Walls,
She had the audacity to go off script and ask a real question.
Yeah.
They silenced her. Wow.
You weren't even in China when that happened. You lied.
Got to protect your people.
Oh my God.
That's what they're doing.
Passionate about it. A young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
So you weren't in Tiananmen.
Never answer the question as it's given.
Senator Vance, in 2016, you
Wait a minute, she's not. I think that was devastating. Quickly, Blake, Brooks, what do you think?
I was having Chinese food, so I misspoke.
I was having Chinese food. Yeah. Oh, Pozo's got a good one too. The entire. Blake,
this one here. Sorry, let me jump in so I can take this off the screen. It says Donald Trump Jr. goes, I'd like to give a friendly piece of advice to self-described knucklehead Tim Walz. Stop digging your own grave. I never expected. I knew J.D. Vance was a great debater, but I never expected him to end Tim Walz's career in less than 45 minutes. Let's go, Vance. That was bad. That was not
All
good.
right, Blake, what did you think of that? I think Waltz got utterly destroyed on that.
Yeah, he's that's a tough position for him. He's taken 30 trips to China. I mean, if he's trying to go for the second most powerful position, we can't afford to have somebody in the executive branch that's compromised by the CCP. So that.
Well, I mean, I think it's more important is that he lied. He lied about being in Tiananmen Square. That's he got nailed by that. You got to give the reporters some kudos for asking that question, right, Brooks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't just say, that you were having dim sum for dinner and during Tiananmen Square and say that I was there. No, you're going to get called out on it. You weren't there. You used it as a audio photo op.
Yeah. Steve.
Obviously, all they do is consistently lie. They try to make themselves to be better than what they are. All of the, Kamala Harris from, on down, saying she's black, saying she was middle class when in fact she was upper class. And it's the same thing. And then he said that all of his trips involved, I mean, the way I heard it, maybe I'm misspeaking, but the way I heard it, all of his trips involved taking school children over there to play games and dance and stuff. I mean, that's another big bunch of baloney.
I also want to lay it out here right now. When I said I had a threesome with Amaranth and Sydney Sweeney, I misspoke. All right, let's get back to it.
Called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay,
the only president in the history of the nation that did everything he said he was going to do.
A lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular.
Another gold
Margaret,
star.
because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax.
Great job.
Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote.
Okay, sorry, quickly. Steve, first, I thought that those were the gotcha questions. I thought Walz got caught with his pants down. I thought Vance, I didn't see the whole thing, but he handled it pretty well. I think Vance annihilated him on that one. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I'd have to agree. I mean, he did make some pretty bold negative statements about Trump, and all you can say is I was wrong. I mean, there's really no other way to cover it.
Right. Well, they were trying to get him to say I was wrong after Walz misspoke, so they could say, "See, they're the same." That's what the game was at. I would have said, "Look, I may have said those things. I was really mad. Donald Trump sat down and explained to me why I was wrong, and I agree with him now. I see what he did, but I didn't see it before. But I wasn't wrong to say those things." Anyway, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think that was my number one criticism of J.D. Vance. I'm not super familiar with him in general. My family's from Ohio. They met him. They like him, and he wins people over when he talks. I think that was my biggest concern is, come on, they've taken 2 assassination attempts at Trump. The person sitting right behind him can't be somebody that'll also stab him in the back. And it started off on a pretty rocky foundation there. So, yeah, you ask him the question. It's a great question. But you know what it did? I think it backfired because the way he answered it was perfect. And everybody else who had a similar concern about J.D. Vance coming into this because of the stuff he said about him negatively, now he had a chance to just set it out lay it all out on the table. It made sense. It was a good answer.
I feel better about it now. And I thought Walz's answer was a disaster. So he lost on that one. Brooks.
Well, I was going to say, look at the ultimate backstabber. Look at Paul Ryan, who stood there with Trump, supporting his policies for 2 years in public, and he was nothing but a Pelosi sock puppet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Blake, your thoughts?
Yeah, Walz definitely on the ropes. He's struggling with the gotchas and getting caught up in his own BS to his own making. And J.D. Vance, he's really coming off sharp and smooth, intellectually honest, trustworthy so far. I kind of like it. I want him to slam him, but I'll take it. I think he's very good. Very
okay.
Good.
All right, let's keep going.
In the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion.
No, it's not.
He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us,
none of the federal government's
it's a beautiful thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful
Let's see what Vance does with this, because the answer to this is that all Donald Trump did is restore the constitutional reality and let the states decide. This is an issue that's supposed to be decided by the states. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. That's all he's got to do is say, now the people get to decide whether they want abortion in their state or not. That's the answer, but let's see what he does.
thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry.
Oh, here we go.
It's going to make it more difficult,
Kamala's
if not
25.
impossible,
Better fact check
to get
his ass.
contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed.
Yeah.
And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide. What's right for Texas might not be right for Washington.
That's correct.
That's not how this works.
Yes,
this
it
is
is.
basic
It does.
human
Yes,
rights.
it does.
We have seen
Exactly how it works.
maternal
57
mortality
countries.
skyrocket in
Right.
Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust
Mayo
doctors.
Clinic.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No,
Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
You know, again, the answer to this is it's now restored to the constitutional norm, which is that issues that are not, not in the Constitution are decided by the states.
And I think the real answer there is this. You say what Donald Trump did and what by working with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, what they did is they made sure that Donald Trump is the furthest between you and your personal medical care as possible. If you like your own personal medical autonomy, that's between you and your state. A president has no business getting between you and how you're going to live and where you're going to live. That's the answer there.
Either preventing you from having an abortion or trying to force you to have an abortion. None of those things are his responsibility. And, we believe the people should decide this question, Tim. Why don't you guys believe in the people? That's another answer. Sorry. All right. How'd you think this?
Quick point.
Okay.
As the former president of Tennessee Right to Life, Rutherford County chapter, I can tell you over 98% of abortions are birth control. They have nothing to do with rape. They have nothing to do with health problems, nothing to do with incest. 98% of them. And believe it or not, over 50% of those abortions are the second abortion for the same woman.
Okay. Frank Luntz, who knows what Kevin McCarthy tastes like, just tweeted out. They're at the commercial break now. Did you get that? Yeah. The first commercial break, my VP debate focus group says by a 10-4 margin that JD Vance is winning. All right, let's roll on through.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota,
separate DNA,
she would be alive today.
Yep.
That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about
the baby's rights?
You hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though,
Here's the
does
perfect
not,
opening.
and that's
No,
the
Donald Trump thinks it's
Governor,
got to
your
be
time is up.
decided by
Senator,
the
let me
people.
ask you about that.
Money
He
lives.
mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have
the federal
families.
government's
So
business.
many young women
They don't
also
need to
see
win anything.
unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn
don't
people's
take your
trust
clothes
back.
off.
And that's why Donald Trump and I are
that
committed to
Don't
pursuing
let your finger
pro-family
cream
policies,
by you.
making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do
He's
a
really
better job at that.
aggravating
And that's
right
what
now.
real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be
Did make a choice. The
women
women
having miscarriages,
did make a
Women's
choice.
women not
restrooms,
getting
women
the
in
care.
sports.
He's
They
pro-Baal.
did make a choice.
He's pro-Baal. He wants to sacrifice babies is what he wants
Yeah,
to do.
the women did make a choice. God, just admit it.
In unsafe sex to I got pregnant. That's the reality.
Science has made a lot of advancements. We figured out what causes that.
Yeah, we know what causes pregnancy. We're pretty sure about it, and it's voluntary. It's voluntary.
Isn't it setting on the toilet seat? Isn't that how you get pregnant?
Yeah, that's how you do. Yeah, and you know how you keep from getting pregnant, ladies. You take an aspirin, yeah, and you hold it between your knees. That's how you get pregnant. The issue here, though, again, is look. It doesn't matter what I think. The federal government, Steve's right. The federal government should not be involved in this issue whatsoever. It's a states' rights issue. The Supreme Court has ruled, and they were correct to rule that way. That's all.
And you know what? That was another opportunity to explain. I don't know how constitutionalist J.D. Vance is, but yeah, like just saying that our nation is essentially 50 separate countries where they figure out what they want to do. There's supposed to be a very light footprint of federal presence. Whatever these Democrats are about, they're shutting you down during COVID. They're doing this during COVID. Like hammer him. Like redirect that and use it against them.
And how come they never bring up how many women die from having the abortion?
Or
they never bring that up. They say, "Oh, so and so died because she had to go to North Carolina from South Carolina." They never tell you how many pass away from getting the abortion.
Right, Blake, you're pretty silent on this. I feel you have a differing opinion. What do you think?
Why do you think Kamala Harris never had any kids?
Because she used to be a dude. Blake?
Well, you know, yeah, I could have seen J.D. Vance slam this waltz on this issue. I'm disappointed again. Same thing that happened under Trump. You know, they never called for a nationwide abortion ban, even though they act like it is. I think 15 weeks sounds like a pretty reasonable thing without getting too far down the rabbit hole. Also, let them get away with that Project 2025 bullshit, which set me. Should have called them out on that one.
You got to smack that down.
Yeah. All right, back to it.
Physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women where to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So in what way? It with President Trump.
In what way was it wrong?
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News Vice Presidential debate in just a moment.
Okay.
What's out of his depth?
That's not an easy subject, but I thought Vance did okay, and I do it. But Blake, I think, you know, look, I'm a hammerhead, right? If it was me, I would crush this fucking guy at every turn. But then all the women would go, "Oh, Mike Barr is so mean, and he's just picking on him," you know. So I got a feeling Vance is really playing a little jujitsu here. He's being the nice guy while he is slaughtering him on the points. Blake, that's kind of how I feel about it. So I think that's the strategy he's using. All right. Anybody have any response?
Well, I'll just say that issue. That's not. Look, this has turned into a testosterone party of Republicans. And it's the women are the party of the Democrats. It's not complete, of course, but it's gone that way. It's not an issue that is really going to poll super well for Republicans. And, you know, he had a chance to say, Trump is the furthest between you and your health care as possible. Once again, like that's the line.
That's exact. I'm so sick of these guys. I'm sick of him already because it's none of the federal government's business, period. He has nothing to stand on. He has no business getting involved as a federal legislator. It's a states' right issue, and he should have shut his freaking mouth.
Yep.
Exactly right.
All right, let's get back to it.
Local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of three beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in second grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation.
The blue cities
I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort?
Yeah.
Is that
yes.
what we
We're
have
going
to
go in your home.
There's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing
everything important, you protect it.
They're being
like the
kids.
border.
We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
Friends with school shooters.
What
a knucklehead. What a knucklehead.
Just said I've become friends with school shooters.
Sometimes I talk a lot. I'm a knucklehead. I don't do things right. I'm not that good.
What the hell is an assault rifle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can't even define what a woman is.
Guys, the thing we're missing here is I've become friends with school shooters. That's really bad.
Unless he's talking about actually going into some sort of thing that I'm unaware of. That's a huge flub. That's weird.
Yeah.
Because he probably was friends with him. He was probably friends with the hitmen that went after
football practice.
Trump.
That's not where we live today. And
friends
several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns.
People who don't have mental health issues,
and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices.
Really shady.
Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this. This issue of loan defaults, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis as an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the Vice President is
as far as
letting in
the housing itself.
Well,
I think it would be cool for Elon and Vivek and like for the Brain Trust to come up with, we got a couple hundred acres sitting here, let's build a cool city. What would a cool like we're stuck with ancient infrastructure from Boston just because it's always been there on cobblestone roads and stuff. I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of cool to start from scratch and not make it all woke and trash. Make it cool. Yeah. Make it good. Whatever that is.
You're talking infrastructure. I don't want the federal government involved. I mean, that's why everything is so screwed up today. You know, if we had a free, fair economy, right? I mean, you can't even get a loan to build a home. You have to jump through all these hoops because of the federal government. I don't want them in my wallet. I don't want them in my backyard. I want to be able to do what I want to do.
It's federal, state, and local governments that are all trying to get money out of you, Brooks. Your expertness.
I'm building a house right now, and I can tell you I've built 21 houses, my 21st house that I've built. The Democrats passed laws making it illegal for homeowners to borrow money from banks to build their own homes. It's against the law. And that means that I have to go to a general contractor to have my house built, which adds about 40% to the cost of the house. So I had to go all the way to Scottsville, Arizona, to a private company to borrow the money to build my own house.
Which is ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And the Democrats put, I'm not kidding, 10,000 custom home builders out of a job overnight in North Carolina with that law. Okay. And it's that way nationwide.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this.
Are you
problem.
serious?
Well, there's
What
a Federal
evidence?
Reserve
25
study that
million
we're happy to
supply
share
and
after the
demand.
debate. We'll put it up on social
my
media,
God,
actually, that
this is
really drills down
atrocious.
on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now,
Supply
of
and
course,
demand.
Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more?
Democrats don't have to answer specifics.
Well, of course,
Why do
we're going
Republicans
to cover
always have to?
Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill.
Oh, my God.
Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're sure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you think the
individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
By the way,
no.
If anybody wants to sign up for Impact Healthcare, go to this link. I just put it in the chat. It's also in the description, MikeBarrow.acnibo. Go to the Impact Healthcare page. It's a health sharing insurance. It pays the doctor more. It costs you 1/3 of what regular insurance costs. You can go to any doctor anywhere on the planet. They will take it. Impact Healthcare. Go sign up if you need health insurance. It's 1,000,000 times less expensive.
Yeah, Mike is exactly right. And Obamacare is not insurance. It's a loan. And if you die without paying that loan back, your kids have to pay it.
There you go.
And the other thing is, by decreasing federal regulations and making the market, making it where you have more insurance companies that can compete for your business,
right,
it lowers the price. But when you say, oh, only one insurance company or two insurance companies can provide medical care for a state,
right.
Your prices are going to be ridiculous.
It's going to be run by a federal health board that will decide that, oh, you're 62 years old, you don't need a hip.
Nope.
Marco, if you need health coverage, go to the link I just gave you. Impact Healthcare. Go to that link, sign up, or contact me elsewhere on social media. I'll help you get signed up if you want. It's about 1/3 the cost of regular health insurance. Medical cost sharing is not insurance. You're correct, Silver Slayer. It's 10 times better than health insurance.
That's right.
And the other thing that needs to be mentioned is that with Obamacare, once you reach a certain dollar amount, they stop paying.
That's right.
And it's all on you, 100%.
Really?
And if you have your knees replaced and you're 34 years old, you're going to pay those knees back. And if you can't pay it, your kids will pay it. That's Obamacare.
In your house. All right, let's finish this up.
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in
They keep
America.
repeating that line.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Frank Luntz just posted, and again, I only bring up Frank Luntz because he knows what Kevin McCarthy tastes like, and he's a douchebag Democrat. I've become friends with school shooters may be the worst line in any 2024 debate. How about any debate ever in history? All right, sorry, back to it.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time.
Oh, the
what
physical
we know
trauma
is
of him
that
going
gets
back
the
to
child
work
off to a
after
better
his kid was
start. The
born.
family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in
I had
there.
to go back
So
to
Kamala
work the
Harris has
night
made
my
it a
children
priority.
were
We
born.
implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest.
Crazy
He's
eyes.
willing to say, bust
Wow.
those unions up, do whatever.
Crazy eyes.
What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have to support paid family leave right now, the community development block grant, and there's another.
First of all, how about lowering taxes so that you can afford to live on one income?
Right.
One kind of child care model.
Yes, boost the value of our currency instead of inflating it.
Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together.
Again, I don't want the federal government involved in this kind of thing.
That makes the most sense. You don't get access.
Lower the taxes, stay out of our bedrooms.
Because you know what's going to happen. Employers will stop hiring women of childbearing age.
You got it.
Yep.
And then they will figure out a way to fire a dad who takes the lead.
The biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids.
We don't have options because the taxes are so freaking high. You can't afford to pay them.
Country that does it, I think we could do it.
Democrats will splice that line and use
Senator,
it for an
thank
abortion
you.
comment with them.
You have
I
also
promise
said,
you'll see the
Senator
meme.
Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on
let's talk about the
childcare
Federal
as they
Reserve
do on
finally.
housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this.
I dare you.
President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers.
That's good.
It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas.
Right
That's
on.
the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump
hard to
said,
argue with that.
bringing in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security.
The overtime is brilliant. The tax act was matched by the Democrats. It washed away.
And I'll go one further. If instead of having this mandatory family leave, if you have a child, no taxes for one of the people who are in the family until the child reaches a certain age.
Yeah, how about a tax holiday for 2 years if you have a baby?
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of
He
Congress
looks
are listening,
terrified,
I can tell you,
weird.
and
Look at those eyes.
this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things.
$5,000 isn't crap.
But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing.
We need a stronger currency that goes farther.
We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President
about
Trump
standing.
And none of them went to court.
looked at the
None
evidence
of them
and said
went to
there was
court.
no widespread fraud.
No, they didn't say that. They said you couldn't bring the case. That's so different.
And Democrats certified the 2020 election
They
results.
phrase their questions
Sent
janky
illegal
intentionally.
slate of electors to Congress.
Let's see if Vance
for
calls it out.
January 6th. Senator
Exactly,
Vance,
Blake.
you have said
Exactly.
you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation
come
crisis
on.
caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your
Could have
question
talked
because you did
about
ask
all
it.
of the fraud they're
What President Trump
uncovering,
has
the
said
bloated
is
voter
that
rolls.
Swing and a miss.
2020,
Swing and a
my
miss.
belief is that we should fight
Yikes.
about those
I'm
issues,
from a
debate
middle-class
those issues
family.
peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside.
Oh my God! Come on, Vance, you missed the entire point.
Technology companies silencing their fellow citizens, and it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years.
Is this almost over? He's starting to
especially
irritate
given
me.
that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats.
Oh, shut
just
up.
said I'm from a middle-class.
Jr. and
He just
Tulsi
did that
Gabbard,
in a different way.
lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course,
We
they
realize he
agree
was
with me and Donald
raised
Trump
by a
on every
middle-class
issue.
psycho.
We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We
Okay,
ought to
well,
try to
that's
persuade our
fair. I
fellow
think
Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in
he
censorship
saved it with that
at
part.
an industrial scale.
Answer
She did it
the
during
question.
COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Weak.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling
Me
to me.
too,
And I say that
man.
because I think we need to tell the story.
What a
Donald
dork.
Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he
Eat that
lost this
frog.
election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day.
Oh my
What?
gosh!
Where?
And it wasn't just in
Fact check that
Minnesota.
bastard. Come
Gathered
on.
on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul.
140
And
police
so they're
officers were
marching to the
beat.
governor's residence
You
and
know, if
they're
that would have
making
happened, it would have been on
The only
the
person
front
there
page
that
of every
said he saw
newspaper
was
and every
forced out
social
crime by
media
state police.
outlet there is.
That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision.
Ooh,
So
I never heard that. I was there. I didn't hear
over
that.
and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents or
What?
laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter.
Imprisoning your
People
political
hear that.
opponents?
So I think this
Did he
issue
just
of
bring that
up?
settling our differences at the ballot box,
Keeping people who were
shaking
at
hands
the
when we lose, being
demonstration
honest about it,
in
but to
jail
deny what happened
without
No
on January 6th,
trial.
the first
No
time
trial.
in American history.
denying them just the
a
most
president
basic
or
rights.
anyone tried to overturn a fair election.
6 of them
with a
have
peaceful
died.
transfer of power.
And it
Yep.
was not a fair
Here we are
election.
4
It was
years
an
later
election.
in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
Democrats-
they're going to cheat, guys. They're
Democrats-
actually going to
Well,
cheat.
not only that,
Senator
they
Vance,
have
did you have a
protested
response?
every election they've lost.
Yeah, the
First of
Democrats
all,
didn't do that in
Right.
2016.
For Democratic
They
leaders to
didn't
say
do
that
it in
Donald Trump is a
2016. They
huge
went
threat
to war with
democracy
Trump
when
for
he
4
peacefully
years.
Gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue
it's called a coup. It's called a coup.
Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this.
You overthrew Trump by fortifying the election.
This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning.
Who's threatened to kill who?
Trying to kill someone.
Who threatened to kill?
I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are.
Posted by Donald Trump.
Oh, wow.
Trump Vance 24, not friends of school shooting.
2020 election.
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the
oh,
test.
come on.
Test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is
the feds do run Facebook. Bullshit.
And now
bullshit.
I'm pretty shocked by this.
They even admitted it. Facebook even admitted it.
It's not a debate.
Yep.
It's not anything anywhere
that was laughable.
other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision,
they had special
hotlines
hotlines to censor people.
That's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is,
you know what the response to this is? You ever notice that Mike Pence is the only member of the Trump administration who hasn't been investigated and charged by your DOJ? I wonder why that is, Tim. That's a good answer for that one. Stop. Don't let them use Pence.
Where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think
crazy
I would do
eyes again.
Because of
crazy
course that's
eyes.
what we would do.
Yep.
So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going
to
honor that democracy.
Do a snapshot of the screen. You look crazy. He looks reasonable.
Is up.
Done deal.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh,
we will be right back with both of our candidates.
Trust
The
me.
CBS News
All over Twitter. The crazy eyes are all over.
Walz lost to the split screen.
Oh, yes, he did. You mean W.C. Fields?
Yeah.
Vice presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance
Go away, kid.
won
You
the
bother
virtual
me.
coin toss and
Good
elected to
editing.
go last. So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look,
And
the
all you
sport of
shooters.
democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built. from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney.
She's so grassroots. She's so grassroots.
Yeah, nobody shows up to hear her speak. She has to pay people $600 a day.
All right,
They
let's
bus them in.
Believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class.
Oh my God, he said it.
Centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance.
Everybody.
I humbly ask for
Chicken
your
in every
vote on
pot.
November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse.
Yep.
Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Vance had a few base hits, maybe a double, but no homers.
Nope.
I don't agree with that. I think he had a couple of home runs, and I think Waltz basically hit himself in the nuts with his own.
There you go.
I thought it was a massacre. It
wasn't a massacre, Mike.
It was 28-10 in a football analogy. It was an easy victory, but it should have been 42.
It should have been a slaughter.
It should have been.
Okay, Steve, go ahead if you have something.
No, it should have been a slaughter. I mean, the fact that, Vance kept repeating himself, he was walking away from the issues. He was, insisting like Waltz that the federal government needs to get involved. in the abortion process, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, my computer is acting up.
Sorry, buddy.
Anyway, can you? God dang it. Anyway,
Yeah,
so the whole point being that the whole point being is that I think he dropped the ball. He should have went for the throat and stopped trying to be, you know, Mr. Nice Guy and pandering to Waltz.
I agree with that to a certain extent. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say it's about temperament and vibes. Let's talk about that. Like, I think J.D. Vance, even keel, steady, polite, respectful, the opposite of all the Democrats have ever heard is that's a guy that wants to make it so you can't abort your baby. He's an evil monster who humps pillows on the sofa, and he's a demon and all this stuff. And if they tuned in, they're like, that's not even remotely close to what they've been saying about this guy. It's a nice counterbalance to Trump. And of course, nobody struck out harder than Tim Walz today. He really put his foot in his mouth on several occasions. A lot of big strikeouts when the moment counted. So
he bounced the ball off of his foot and it bounced up into his nuts and took him out of the game. Brooks.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Walz didn't make any. I mean, he made so many faux pas. It wasn't even funny. Yeah. But he also stuck to his communist roots. And anybody watching the debate can see this. But I'm still going to be critical of Vance because he could have said, you know, we have laws. We should have built the wall. He should have stuck with the policies and grabbed the MAGA torch and lit the damn place on fire with it.
We have plenty of laws on the books. We have plenty of regulations on it. We don't need any more.
Yeah, the thing about that too, Brooks, is that I can tell he was trying not to beat up on the guy because you know it's like the ladies don't like it when you beat up on the poor guy. But he went too easy on him. He could have done that with the same nice guy smile thing that he did the whole event. TV's Blake Wally, you get the final word, even though your name is now Mike Barra. I will fix that while you're talking.
Well, I've been Mike Barra all night. I guess I have. Maybe I didn't adjust it, but that's all good. Proud to represent. Yeah, Walz didn't win anybody over tonight. I don't think he's not going to have a whole lot of highlights there. As people have pointed out, Brian, he's got crazy guys. He looks like a lunatic.
Yeah, he was defeated by the split screen. No doubt about that.
That's a great line right there.
Yeah, so it's not going to look good. Yeah, it's like, you know, Kennedy Nixon, but 10 times worse.
Right. And I hope somebody fact checks that his son was witness to a shooting.
Right. Oh, he's already getting buried for that. Yeah. So, and I would agree with a lot of you guys are saying the same thing. But yes, J.D. Vance, very nice, very composed, very smart. But yeah, he had so many opportunities to just, you know, crush this thing, and he let him off the hook. And a lot of his open things that were just right there, slam dunk it, hit it, got it, and they didn't mention it. It was shocking, but
he's also let's remember he's a youngster in politics. He's not. You know, this is.
Look, you got to have better preparation than that. You got to know what they're going to say about you. You just go through the list and you have your response. If he brings this up, this is what you say. Keep it short, keep it to the point, and then go back.
Redirect bad questions. And I thought the moderators framed some of these questions completely disingenuously multiple times.
Right. I think when you have shitty questions, I think you should address the shitty questions first and then go into, by the way, I want to talk about this. And I was disappointed. Nobody talked about the Americans in Tennessee and North Carolina. A great line would have been, you know, look, you know, the difference between you and Donald Trump is on the ground right now in North Carolina, in Tennessee, in Georgia, where Americans are suffering. You know, Kamala Harris went to a fundraiser with her $70,000 necklace on. You know, you guys are nowhere to be found. And the $265 billion you sent to Ukraine in a war that was lost from day one, needs to go to the American people. Those are slam dunk lines, and it doesn't make you look like a bad guy. So I think there were missed opportunities.
And he had probably a half a dozen great examples. Yeah. I mean, he He had the fire in Hawaii. He had the train wreck in Ohio. He had tons of examples where the federal government stepped in, offered aid, and they were AWOL.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys.
There were so many things I left on the table, but this made it more enjoyable having to sit through it. Thank you, guys.
Brooks, it's great to have you back. Brian, it's been great for you sitting in for Brooks. Thank you for doing that. I don't know if we'll have you back because none of us really like you very much.
He's way better looking than any of us.
Brian, come back.
Okay, they like me. They really like me.
But we will have you on from time to time as
anytime. Just let me know
as things permit, and we appreciate you being here, Steve. Boss, you are an epic, awesome dude. You really had a lot to say tonight. Thank you for being so succinct and powerful in your presentation. And TV's Blake Wally, once again, the restrained journalist. You are an example, Blake, of how journalism should be in the future. So thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. Go to the CBD Gurus. Go to Impact Health Sharing. The link I put in the description, and I put it in the chat. Have a great one. I'll be back tomorrow with Jen on Tell the Truth Wednesday. Come back, Brian. Well, he'll be back. We promise. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being